Hi folks, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So we've been in this pandemic for almost a year, and of course it has changed up drastically the way we all work and collaborate. The paper I'm looking at today was published back in the fall of 2020 and tries to take a quantitative empirical look at how work from home affects collaboration. From the point of view of someone who studies these kinds of things, the giant migration to work from home was obviously a once in a lifetime, large scale, natural experiment in the real world. However, before we rush to make any conclusions from the data that came out of that mass shift, we have to be really careful about the causal link. We have to very carefully isolate the effect of just working from home from all the other confounding factors that went with working from home during a pandemic. Confounding factors such as schools being closed or having additional caregiving responsibilities and just a lot more added stress and anxiety. So you really have to use a statistical technique that is able to tease apart all these confounding factors and give you an estimate for the effect caused only by working from home. The authors use a statistical technique called difference in differences to do this. And this is enabled by dividing the population of workers into two broad classes. They look at the people who were already working from home prior to the pandemic and use them as kind of a control group. Because if you look at the changes in their behavior, you can attribute them to factors beyond just working from home. And then you can contrast this with the change in behavior of the other group, the group that was working in the office prior to the pandemic. By looking at the differences between these two groups, you can isolate the effect of just working from home and tease apart the effect of all these other confounding factors that came with the pandemic. The authors are from Microsoft and they were able to use Workplace Analytics, which is a product that aggregates the software usage patterns of Microsoft employees. And using these analytics, they can break up the working time of an employee into two broad chunks. One is what they call focus hours, which they define as the number of hours with blocks of greater than 2 hours without any breaks or meetings in between. On the other hand, if you look at all the hours spent on emailing and messaging and meeting, those are defined as collaboration hours. So the question they're trying to answer is how the distribution of focus hours versus collaboration hours changed due to this mass shift to working from home. And that brings us to their first major finding, which is that work from home lowered collaboration hours. They found that collaboration hours decreased by nearly 2%, and there was a corresponding rise in focus hours of about 3.5%. If you look at the breakdown of collaboration time, they found that meeting hours actually went down by nearly 6.5%, but messaging hours saw a sharp uptick by about 27.7%. Now, there's a really interesting divergence in the behavior of the group that was used to working from home. That is, they were working from home even before the pandemic versus the group that was working in the office before the pandemic. If you look at the change in collaboration and meeting hours for employees that were used to remote working, the authors saw no statistically significant difference. However, if you look at the other group for employees that were new to working from home, both collaboration and meeting hours were down 3.1% and 9.2% respectively. It is in messaging hours where you see a really drastic difference between these two groups, with the experienced remote workers only increasing their messaging hours by about 5%, whereas the workers with less remote working experience increased their messages by nearly 40%. What this difference between the two groups is suggesting is that some of this effect of working from home is from the actual need to collaborate and work remotely, as opposed to the experience of physically being at home. So what does this finding mean for the future of work? In the future, we're likely to have a much bigger component of working from home than before. The main finding of this work was that there was an increase in blocks of free time where people can do heads down work on their tasks, but then there was also a decrease in collaboration time, particularly in meeting. The question that always comes up when it comes to working remotely is whether teams can continue to innovate and be creative when they're fully work from home or fully remote. How do you replace all the spontaneous and serendipitous water cooler conversations and in-person interactions? While those still remain important open questions, this work sheds some light on the quantitative differences in how workers have been spending their time with this large shift to working from home. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.